My background, I studied computer science, spent many years as a software engineer, big metalhead. So if you come up to me and ask me a question at the end of the show, make sure you speak up and speak into my right ear because I've spent way too much time standing next to amplifiers, so my left ear is being shot. Okay? Awesome. Yeah, so when I'm not in front of a computer or doing API security, playing guitar, listening to music, further damaging my hearing. Or at a concert, actually. I was at a music festival last month, and in California called Power Trip. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, I saw AC/DC, Metallica, Judas Priest, Guns N' Roses, yeah, and Iron Maiden, which is always a good treat. Tool was there, and they were a little out of place, but still fantastic music festival. What?
Tool belongs
Big Tool fan?
More so than you, apparently.
Oh, okay, I guess so. But it's still amazing music festival, and I think even from that experience, it got me thinking about APIs. I know what Metal Show and APIs is the experience now that we're able to give concert goers through the apps that we give them for digital experiences is all API enabled. And so as we have this discussion today, taking the context of all these digital experiences that we deal with on a daily basis, and I'm going to start off with an example. I was having lunch with a mentor, a friend of mine. I have
You're good.
We're recording on this too, so this is fun. Okay, so I'm having lunch with a mentor friend of mine, and we're talking about different books we're reading, and he mentions one particular book, and I don't remember what the book was, but I remember I wanted to get it in and order it so that I got it in the backlog. My wife makes fun of me about reading because I'll get through like 4 or 5 chapters, and then I'll put it aside because I got the gist of it. So there's this like stack of books at my house. But the point was, I put it in my Amazon app, and I say, okay, I'm gonna order it, buy it now. Amazon makes it super easy. And 2 hours later, I'm driving into my driveway. Guess what I see coming out of my driveway? It's the Amazon truck. And it's probably my usual weekly payload of Amazon orders that I do. But I open the box, what do I see? It's the book I ordered. This is crazy. It was one of those 2-hour local deliveries that Amazon had set up. And so from there, you start to think, what did it take to enable that delivery? All the services in the mobile application to search for the product, the logistics to communicate the delivery to the delivery driver, to get that item on the truck, and to get it there all within 2 hours, that's all driven by APIs. It's not some batch process that runs overnight to get that data delivered. It is something that's happening in real time and in that moment to provide quite possibly the best customer experience. Not that I needed to read that book right there in that moment. That's questionable for what the value there is. But the fact that we're now not in a world where I have to wait 3 to 6 weeks for delivery. Who's old enough to remember that? Yeah. So that in and of itself is emblematic of the magic of APIs. And of course, I think we've all heard the Bezos mandate, which demanded that anything that Amazon built would be a service within Amazon. And I think a lot of organizations have essentially replicated that mandate, which has driven the growth of APIs within the enterprise in general. This is from a website that sadly no longer exists, Programmable Web, rest in peace. So I spent many years at MuleSoft prior to my current company, and it was actually an acquisition that MuleSoft had acquired. But it's sad to see them go. But still, the data up to 2020 is emblematic again of that explosive growth of APIs in the enterprise. So the numbers are there. And so from that, we get to see everywhere that from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we go to bed, there's some sort of API interaction happening. The APIs are powering that communication. Right down to, controlling a nuclear power plant. Some of that communication at an electric facility is being driven through an API. Transfer of financial transactions through banking or financial services institutions, and of course access to our very important personal information. And so what this starts to present is a potential attack surface for an adversary. With the APIs being easily accessible via the internet, the frequent change that you have to track, and of course the easily, we'll get into some examples, the relative ease in which you can attack these APIs and break them and use them in an attack creates this new attack surface within our organizations. So to bring that home a little bit, let's think about some use cases. First one is B2C use cases like we've described. The one of me picking up and getting a package, me going to a concert, buying my tickets, or actually the Uber drive here. That's a whole 30-minute story in and of itself that I won't bother, but let's just say I had a little trouble finding the right location. So B2C interactions, banking, in banking, for example, account transfers, checking your balance, doing transfers, Venmo, whatever that may be, Zelle. Interchange of data between companies. Even in that Amazon use case, you got to think about Amazon and its partners for getting publishing partners to get that book. They have to interchange. Hey, we need this many in stock, so they'll fulfill some sort of order. I wish I knew who everybody here worked for. I'd use some examples more specific to you, but the exchange of data between one organization to another, a B2B use case, is an opportunity for APIs. For example, in retail, inventory, shipping, manufacturing, all that's done. A lot of it's still done via EDI. If you've ever seen an EDI transaction, but still more and more some of that B2B transaction. Yeah, you're hurting back there. Some of that can still be done via APIs, or at least wrapped in API to make that a little bit more seamless. Software as a service. I mean, that's everywhere in our enterprises. My favorite example is Twilio, because at least as a developer, I love being able to just send mass text messages. No, not really, but Twilio is a great example of an API-first company, and that everything they do is API-driven, of course. Salesforce, Slack, Google Maps, ChatGPT now. I added that in the last 6 months, as you can imagine. ChatGPT now, as we know, is able to reach out and call APIs to enrich the data that it itself can answer. So what are the implications of that in these types of interactions? And then even just integrating your internal systems. Single sign-on, your human resources systems. I have a great example around human resources systems, and your consumption of SaaS applications as well. So thinking about your businesses and the types of business that we interact with on a daily basis, a lot of these use cases will, of course, be API driven. And it's no question why enterprises have adopted APIs, whether it's GraphQL or RESTful services today. It's really helped enable that digital experience that we all get to enjoy. We could spend a long time describing just going to a theme park. I know Disney's done a wonderful job at their parks where you can wear this wristband and just swipe and it automatically bills to my credit card, gives me access to my room. Once again, it's about limiting that friction that the consumer has with their businesses, all driven through an API. A little bit more lighthearted here. This is kind of what the ideal business stack will look like from a technology standpoint. You have the user interacting, communicating, wanting to communicate with some sort of service within the enterprise, and that transaction is likely going to go through a WAF, an API gateway of some sort. You're going to have an API management solution somewhere in there, something handling identity, and then your microservices and your actual implementation in the back end. Okay? And I hope you guys like XKCD, because here's what the real world looks like in our enterprise, right? You got some stack of technology that someone built 30 years ago, a public API built on top of that, and your CIO left, so we had a new one, then there's this new initiative, then you started implementing some different sets of APIs on top of that. All right, that's kind of how that goes. So what you end up with over time is a hodgepodge of different technologies, different API services built, sprawl, things you don't even know were there, things you should have decommissioned back before 2000, all sorts of things. Now bringing in multi-cloud technologies. Now I've got some of this in the data center, I've got some of this in my AWS account, Azure, and then Google Cloud on top of that. So what we're heading towards is how do we bring this some sense to all of this. This image is from a presentation, I forgot which reInvent it was. It was probably 10 years ago now. But what it takes to get video to your set-top box, to your set-top box, to your phone, to your tablet, whatever device that is. And this is a mapping of Netflix's overall architecture and all the videos and all the video services and UI services in the space. Each one of these ostensibly will represent some sort of microservice that they have deployed. And so you start to see what madness you kind of create within an enterprise from that standpoint. Now, back to some other large software companies. Amazon, of course, similar idea. Uber, that right here went through all these services. And of course, our favorite X. I should update that as well, I guess. Now, that's consistent with what we've discovered at No Name from a research standpoint. The average enterprise has over 25,000 APIs. There's reports of significant incidents on a regular basis. The worst part about it is it's delaying the implementation of a lot of mission critical projects. Understanding that the APIs are driving digital initiatives that are going to lead to new revenue, the fear of increased attack surface is delaying some critical projects. Another item here that we found, of course, is you want to find these incidences. Yes, sir.
Clarification, these are numbers from your 2022 report?
Yes.
Wow, that's scary. Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Edgar, can you repeat the question?
The question was, is this data from our 2022 report? I think we're due for our 2023 report here any day now. But yeah, I don't expect that number to go down. That's for sure. Hopefully incident rates are getting better as we're getting better at mitigating that risk. Hope is not a strategy. But I'm sure that, and also the shift left, wanting shift left is ideal because you want to capture and ensure you're not finding these vulnerabilities in production. We'll talk about some ways, at least we're approaching mitigating that risk. Further into our report, at least 76% of the companies we surveyed have experienced some sort of incident in the last 12 months. Of course, 74% do not have a complete inventory or know what APIs in their ecosystem will return sensitive data. 71% are confident and satisfied that they were receiving sufficient API protection. So there's a little dissonance there. Like, how is it you don't know really what's out there from a security standpoint, but yet you're satisfied? I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there, or dissonance in that report, or at least from what we see with our customers. So what it says, and from that, first and foremost, how do you even begin to protect what you don't know is out there from an inventory standpoint? I think this framework demands any critical asset in your enterprise. That's first and foremost, the first thing you got to go do is inventory it and discover it. We have a guide as far as what are some things that we should know are critical potential problems in our API implementations. I won't dig into each one here, but the OAuth API Top 10 security is there. They just refreshed it in the last 6 months. For those of you unfamiliar, this is not the WAF Top 10 or the Application Security Top 10. This is very specific to APIs. And that's important, even though APIs are a subset, or API security is a subset of application security, it does demand its own specific top 10. And I would say, I know some of these, a lot is made about broken object level authorization issues. You'll hear No Name talk about it, and every API security vendor will talk about it. But really what I see with our customers is number 8 ends up being the most frequent one we see in customer environments. And that's security misconfigurations. I came prepared today with some examples. So I'll start here. First example, it's a global energy company. They have an API implementation, it's a notifications API. It's one I see frequently in customer environments. The sole task of this API is you send it a set of data, and it's supposed to either allow you to send an SMS message, an email, or some other form of communication. Page video, right? So through that service, what we found is that there was no authentication on that API, of course. Now, I'm sure that guarantee you that wasn't intentional. Just somebody probably forget to configure a flag on the service or on the API management solution. What that meant is anybody could call that API and send an email as whoever they wanted within that organization. Now, the CISO in that case did not believe us. Okay. And there's no way. And we're like, well, can we show you and send an email using that service to you? They're like, go right ahead. And, well, here's a screenshot. We blurred out the name, of course, but that's how we had to prove it. Because there was so much, back to that dissonance in that report, is maybe there's a disconnect in understanding what you're capable of through that or what the implications are, but I think knowing that phishing is still something that a lot of people at an enterprise fall for. And imagine now I can send an email to anybody in that enterprise. Now I can get them to do what I want. Yeah, question, sir.
How many emails did you send in?
Just that one.
Just the single one.
Yeah.
I didn't see your question.
How many emails did you send and approve to? I was hoping it was near 10,000, but you said one.
Yeah, we said one. I should remember to rephrase the question. So the question was, how many emails did we send? And simply it was one to prove the point. Usually should be enough. Would you like another, sir? You may have another. This next example is a dining chain, restaurant chain, however you want to refer to it. This was the human resources example that I hinted at. They had a HRMS system, so this is your back-end integration stuff, with an API in that platform. So this may not actually be that enterprise's fault, but still, this is within maybe the third-party risk realm, where I'm adopting a solution, installing it in my premises, and that solution itself is exposing APIs. So what we found while monitoring traffic on that network is that there were API transactions with no authentication on the ability to retrieve employee records from that HRMS system. And so here's a screenshot of just the kind of data that we have. Of course, the name, job code, and further down, I'm pretty sure was salary information and other sensitive and critical data. Okay. So now imagine if an adversary gets a foothold in your network and then suddenly is able to pull data out of your HRMS at will. Okay? Now I've got a few. I'm going to pick on WAFs next. WAFs, when they're enabled, configured properly, are supposed to block SQL injections. And so one of the things we see really frequently in our customers' environments is SQL injections, and when they hit the API too. And so when we see a lot of them, and Adam over here can attest to that, great CD, I know these too, is in our customer environments, we're seeing these SQL injections, we have to ask the question, do you have a WAF in your stack? We ask that of the customer. And they're like, yeah, why? Well, we're seeing a lot of SQL injections hit your APIs, and theoretically, those should have been blocked way before they got there. And they're like, let's go check. And so the customer is inspired to go verify the configuration of the SQL of the WAF, the Web Application Firewall, and lo and behold, they find out the WAF had that configuration disabled. Whatever reason, it was adding too much overhead, or it was too many false positives, on and on and on. Now again, not something that somebody was doing intentionally. They made a practical decision that was helping the business and making sure that API transaction happened quickly, but still introducing risk to their underlying API infrastructure. Got one more example here. This is with, actually I'm going to skip that one because I didn't block out. Oh. Yeah. There we go. Okay. Something happened when I converted it to, we're going to have to edit that out. Okay. So in this one is a just simple scraping attempt from somebody scanning the APIs. So this is an example of just somebody poking around. And this goes to the idea that it's not, an API is not going to be the first thing somebody does when they hit an environment. You're familiar with the MITRE attack framework. They're going to start with reconnaissance. They're going to poke around your network. And here's some of the things we see is adversaries are often trying to just poke around your network and see what is out there. They'll scrape DNS, they'll scrape your domain names to look to see what services are exposed externally. And that's where that opportunity presents itself. They discover something with weak authentication or no authentication at all, they can start saying, what other services does this organization have? And so this is something we detected in one customer environment, just somebody going through, traversing a document API of some sort and just poking around and seeing what they can find. They're hoping for a gold mine. Okay. Now those are just some examples we found day to day in the platform, and there's been some highly publicized, or at least I would consider pretty publicized incidents related to APIs. I'd like for them to be lower and lower, but I don't think that'll be the case going forward, and hence this conversation that we're having today. So anything pop out to you like, yeah, okay.
I mean, you didn't pick on Okta, because they're the easiest ones to. Especially with recent.
They may or may not be somebody that I have to be respectful towards, because they may or may not be a customer. That's, because notice Peloton's not up here either. There's a few of those that we certainly could highlight. And plus Okta, I think that one, we can talk about Okta. So Okta, most recently, they got an access to an administrative API, to my understanding, through an employee that I guess they got phished through a phone call, right?
They got sent the HAR file. They got sent the HAR file, which contained the credentials, and then they went in that way. But the key goes to is the API security. They're not checking that authorization is coming from the same place where it was. It's not bound to a location. They're not doing additional token or security on that.
Yeah. Well, I'll add Okta for the next one. On this one. So yeah, I guess I could say we're part of the mitigation plan at Okta now for something like that. Okay, so with this in mind, with the incidents that we've seen and the fact that APIs are still growing as just a sheer number of them, the implications to security teams, as we've seen, is a security practitioner we're behind, in a sense. The amount of APIs the application teams are building versus the staff that we have, the tooling that we have, there's a huge gap there. So we're referring to this as the API security gap. Very cute, I'm sure. But it's true. I think there's a lot of pressure on security practitioners to be able to adapt and change to this new landscape. But the tooling maybe is not there, the investment is not there, and perhaps, again, this is my call to action. I think this all demands a little bit more focus and action on that. So there is hope. From No Name's point of view, there is a way to resolve this. And first and foremost, it starts with discovery. Is discovering and inventorying the APIs in your network to know what you have. Back to that question, I can't secure what I don't know I have. From that inventory, you can begin to understand things like, how is my API configured? Do all my APIs have proper authentication? Are any of the basic vulnerabilities in them mitigated with encompassing controls? Am I prioritizing the risk around certain APIs according to their business value? Which is, from a security practitioner standpoint, probably the most important thing we do, is adjust our priorities to that. Then by monitoring traffic, we feel that you can begin to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to understand how are people consuming those APIs, so you can detect anomalies in API abuse, such as what we saw with Okta, where, hey, this API is being called from a place that it's never been called before. Why is that? And lastly, is that part of shift left? So let's help our developers ensure they have the ability to find vulnerabilities before they go to production, so we don't introduce new risks and make that problem even worse. We talked about reconnaissance. I think there's a lot we can do from an outside looking in standpoint to find, for example, I've seen incidents where customers have left their Postman collections. If you're familiar with Postman, it's a tool for calling APIs. If you misconfigure your Postman collection, it can be available in the public. And I know testers use it to maintain their API call keys in there. They can leave that exposed to the internet, and then anybody can gain access to your production APIs via those Postman collections. I've seen that happen. So one of the things that we look to try to do with reconnaissance is identify these leakages. Something as basic as still AWS keys in GitHub is still a thing. Posture management, we talked a little bit about that. That's complementary to your API inventory, understanding your inventory, how are these things configured, who are they associated with, who owns them, on and on. Using behavioral analysis to understand what abuses could potentially be happening. So where machine learning and AI can certainly augment perhaps the lack of staff that we have within security practices. Automated testing. We have CI/CD pipelines. If you have that maturity, adding and augmenting the test suite that you already have with API security focused testing could augment and ensure that you're not pushing vulnerable APIs to production. And I think from here on this part is why I think in that survey, CISO said, hey, this is where we want to focus our energy, because it actually ends up being where, I'm just going to fast forward to the point here, where the cost, the time value proposition is. And there's the cost of fixing something when a developer is implementing it versus when it's out there in production is, orders of magnitude more. It seems like an obvious point, but I think it's emblematic of the importance of doing this type of testing earlier and frequently in the software development lifecycle. Pretty sure to ask, show of hands, is anybody doing any sort of API security testing with their organizations today? Let's see that. Good. You'll get there. Very good. Yeah, so bookend that conversation. All hope is not lost. Enterprises, there's solutions out there. You know what my favorite one is that can certainly address this gap in the enterprise and protect you from all those types of incidents that I outlined. And maybe to bring the point home a little bit more, I think we saw in those breaches, the most critical part, really what gives APIs their value again, is the data that those APIs transact. So I think this falls under the umbrella of potential data breaches that we could lead to. This is some research from IBM, the cost of a data breach from 2022. Especially gets more expensive as you get into like healthcare and financial services because they have regulatory scrutiny and legal scrutiny around that. It could be in the millions for an organization. Cost by, I think it's $10 per record approximately. So think about that. Okay. And also, as you think about your enterprises, what are the platforms that you leverage for your API ecosystem? API gateways, load balancers, application platforms, development platforms. All these contribute in one way or another to your API ecosystem. So consider how those platforms are secured and how you're protecting them. With that, I'll open up a little bit for more questions.
You explain the first item on the OWASP vulnerability?
Oh, yeah, we'll go back to that.
Repeat.
The question is, explain number one on the OWASP top 10 of API security, the broken object level authorization issue. So this is, the technical description is someone is authenticated to an endpoint, but is authorized to access multiple records in an API. The analogy I like to use to simplify it is, well, I checked into a hotel yesterday, and they issued me a key card. That key card grants me access to my hotel room in that ideal case. But let's say something's wrong with how the controls are applied to that key card, and say suddenly I have access to every door. So irrespective of all the other compensating controls in that hotel room, whether it's a security guard, a receptionist at the front desk, a camera in the hallway, I'm still able to access all those doors and potentially breach those hotel rooms. That's what a bullet is. So I think I had an example. I can't show it because it didn't blur out the names properly. But if you have an accounts API, let's say I log into my account on my Bank of America or Chase, nobody specifically, I'm calling out in that case, but let's say an attacker doesn't necessarily go through their phone to look at the bank account app. They're gonna, well, can I manipulate this field to see if I can get access to somebody else's account? That's the description of that. And that's the risk, is really granting someone access to records that don't belong to them. Yes, sir.
While we're on the topic of Ebola, are there any tools that you've seen that can successfully identify Ebola? Historically, that it's been really hard for tools to identify as more business tools or anything else.
Yes, so the question is, have I seen a tool that can successfully identify a broken object level authorization issue? I was asked not to make this a sales pitch, but yeah, I work for a company that happens to do that. And that's where the runtime security piece happens, is solutions like No Name and others use the historical data of monitoring traffic versus an API and build a baseline around how users interact with that API. And should there be, and the way it's basically done is you say, okay, typically only one person accesses, with this ID, accesses one record on here. And a deviation from that would be suddenly they're accessing multiple records. It's standard, it's really statistics. It's nothing super sophisticated, but that's the way how you begin to identify someone finding a broken object level authorization issue with the API. And unfortunately, this is one of those that you can't just fix with applying a new policy. It is going to be something that's broken within the implementation of the API. So it's not like, oh, apply a rate limiting policy and now stop it. No, you're likely going to have to, that's an incident that you'll need a developer to go fix that or repair that. Otherwise, that's just going to be the way that software is implemented.
So staying on that topic, out of the top 10, which ones are actually policy-driven fixes versus fundamental or business or code?
Let me take that picture first. Good. All right. So within security misconfiguration, you're going to have a lot of stuff. Lack of rate limiting. There used to be.
Number 4.
Number 4 under so that's rate limiting.
Yep.
Okay. So you can fix that with rate limiting. But even within security misconfiguration, we might some systems might detect there's a API with a direct line to the internet, no WAF, no API management. You could orchestrate that. You could reroute traffic through some sort of API gateway to compensate for that control automatically. That's more of a policy or infrastructure driven. Unsafe consumption, maybe not, because really probably just in my view, probably just unsafe.
What constitutes unsafe that's different from?
Yeah, that's the definition. There's the eye of the beholder. The unrestricted resource consumption is basically I can consume as many records as I need, regardless of how the system is designed. That's, you can call it DDoS, you can, whatever that may be. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You talked about shifting left some of this and doing security testing. Can you drill into that a little bit? What all does that entail? Are you talking about like automated testing or manual?
Yeah, so some solutions
Can you
offer.
repeat the question or what?
The question was to drill down into testing of APIs, and am I referring to automated testing? Yes, it is automated testing. So at least within the context of No Name, what we're able to do is provide a suite of tests that developers can run either on demand or as part of a CI/CD pipeline. And it's not meant to replace a pen tester by any means, because I think there's things that pen testers do that, again, it's a human element. You're more creative, but there's things that are known that you can do to manipulate business logic in an API to break it. So I would see API security testing as a way to augment any existing bug bounty or pen testing initiative that an enterprise has. Yes, sir.
So to follow up on that one, kind of what you said there is, are the security tools that we have in place replacements or are they augmentation for engineering maturity?
So let's say a tool like Burp Suite, you could probably replace it with a more enterprise-grade security testing tool because they're likely to have all those open source test tools there anyway. So all the ZAP tests, the API security testing tools are going to have those built in. So there's an opportunity for a replacement there because I know some places do have like licenses for ZAP. But by and large, I do think an API security testing tool or platform will be in addition to any existing API security tool or management tool, whatever that may be. it certainly would be a net new tool that you'll have to learn how to operationalize within an organization, know how to handle the specific types of incidents that are coming out of it. So there's a whole question around vulnerability management there. So there's certainly, it is above and beyond what already exists within security operations.
Like this is gonna take.
Love the questions.
So, obviously, we're technologists and we're trying to solve problems with technology here, but have you ever seen organizations use, like, different human policies to motivate people to do the work that's obviously not getting done, right? The CISO is, the CISO is comped and bonus based on not having security incidents. CIO is comped and bonus based on delivering software, right? And at the end of the day, those two things butt up against each other
Yeah,
organizationally.
Want to talk about target? Okay.
Do you see that conversation happening at that level, or are we just saying, are we just saying, like, let's just throw more computers at this and see what happens?
So everybody's watching the SEC lawsuit against SolarWinds right now?
Yes.
Yes. Now, what's really fascinating about that is the level at which they're going into even using as evidence the jokes that the security practitioners were using about their policies. I think it's time for the CISOs to kind of put on their big boy pants, in a phrase, but it's going to mean they have to elevate the conversation and really be treated on par with the CIO and other C-suite. Because unfortunately, what I see is in a lot of situations, the CISO is subservient to either someone in legal or the CIO, and the parties just aren't there. So I think it's up to organizations to really elevate that position within the enterprise so they truly have, authority over that. Not just through tools, but the decisions that are made. Yes, it's practical, but look at now we're being sued by the SEC, and it's ruined our reputation, on and on. That needs to have a bigger voice within at a board level, in my opinion. I hope I answered your question. Maybe not.
You're getting there. So I can't tell you how many times as a developer that security came to me and said, hey, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And I looked him in the face and said, I'm actually not gonna do that. And I'm gonna get a bonus for not doing that, because this thing has to be done right now, right? And that's an organizational issue, right, that I'm curious.
I've not seen that change yet.
Okay.
But it needs to, again,
Because at the end of the day, shift left is shifting resources out of the CISO's organization into the CIO's organization.
Yeah.
You're saying, I don't have the resources here to do it, so let's mandate it on, through a system or tooling or additional training for this group that's paid on delivery, right?
Yeah.
And so until you hook those two incentive programs together, I don't see anything changing, right? How can a security architect get a bonus at the end of the year when delivery didn't, because when they made them stop delivering?
Yeah. It's a cultural shift, and I imagine it's one that's been happening for a long time. I'm not winning that argument anytime soon, I'm sure. I think also it's up to ICE being a software developer in the past. I think it's reputation to you too. Are you delivering code quality and security risk? It's something culturally that needs to change in enterprises in general. I don't know how to change the bonus structure for that.
But the incentive structure, right? Like, right, once again, we're technologists, we wanna solve it with technology,
Yeah.
right? But I'm not sure that's ever gonna be enough. I think my question was like, are you hearing those conversations? And
Yeah, the conversations happen.
I think I've heard it.
Everybody nods like, yeah, we really need to do
We
that.
should.
We should do that, but it's, again, I guess the value of delivering that project supersedes the value of extending development for another 3 weeks to harden it just a little bit more.
I think that's the perception, I'm not sure that's true, but I think that's the perception.
That's the perception, right? Does anybody not feel that way in this room? Does anybody not feel that way? That security takes a backseat to delivery?
I think it's gonna take the front seat as soon as the SolarWinds, CISO gets
Yeah.
fraud charges, or the board members start getting charged, because that also came through
Yeah.
the disclosure agreement for SEC.
Yeah.
So once board members start getting charged, once CISOs start getting charged, it's gonna become
Yeah.
a front seat topic.
That will change
Yep.
the culture. And like, if you haven't looked at look up password policy SolarWinds SEC, and it's just people like you and me, like, haha, yeah, we have a strong security policy, password policy, but we let the password go through. You know, and you're half making fun of the policies and how things are done, the culture, really the security culture, and now they're gonna face serious federal charges as a result of that attitude. Same way go, yeah, I let that API through without vulnerability, no problem, I got my bonus. Well, next time that happens, maybe there's gonna be federal charges associated with it. That will change the culture.
So what is your crystal ball on this? Is it CISOs are gonna take ownership and companies are gonna take liability, or are they gonna start outsourcing everything and make other people take on that liability?
No, it's gonna have to, I mean, you're gonna have to own it. Realistically, you're asking me my crystal ball prediction. I'm being recorded, right? I'm gonna be an optimist and say that enterprises, everybody here being good-hearted technologists and security practitioners will want to take ownership of that and make their enterprises better for it. That's the optimistic. Gentlemen, any questions for you? Yeah, some whispers between two of you.
I'm just thinking that, you know, when you are measured by something, you're optimized. You're gonna optimize to it. Right? So when you're measured by something, you're gonna optimize to it. So this conversation, I'm thinking, until that security posture becomes part of what me as a software developer I'm being measured against, then yeah, then delivery's gonna win.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about it like it's an or, but I really think the maturity is it's an and.
It's an and. Yeah. Well said.
I mean, he's always a disruptor.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Slows me down.
That mic. So, that was loud. My wife happens to be in the line of security as well, and she deals with that exact question, right? And her approach is to partner with the CIO, right? Because it's not her problem. Security is everyone's problem, and I've seen, you know, our CISO talk about it in that frame too. Like everybody's responsible for security, down to literally everybody. The person letting people in the front door to every developer, you know, all the way through. And the CISO has to articulate the risks that the business is taking. And, you know, if the business wants to sign up for that, you know, it's the CISO's job to let them know the risk is there and it's real, and show the evidence and show the technical aptitude to demonstrate that it's a problem. But I know that her tactic is to partner with the board and with them and, you know, to lay it out and say, look, we collectively are signing up for this, don't put this on me kind of thing. And I think that's fair. I think it, you know, and so I think on the security side, I mean, we recently had a project that wanted to change around how we access the, you know, a scope to an API that would severely over provision it, right? So it would let the one partner that we wanted to have this capability, if they somehow, you know, lost their credentials or it got, you know, replayed or something, you know, literally whoever got a hold of this API could look up every single customer in our, you know, that we have, you know, so like, you know, so it was down to a development crew that said, that sounds like over authentication, you know, over authorization, to put a stop to it. So it literally takes everybody to kind of be paying attention to that stuff. You can't just stick it on the CISO or the CIO. They're ultimately gonna pay the price for it, whatever happens, but it is a whole company thing.
Yeah, it's a question of leadership, it sounds like, what you're describing, because even, maybe it's not, the onus is not on me necessarily, but as an organization, I need to win the argument over time, build credibility, show value, and show that this is the right way to do things. Maybe sometimes it takes an incident to prove the point, hopefully you don't have to get there, but then that's the burden on leadership, is that we win that credibility and build partnerships and build that bridge.
And if you have that understood and agreed to and aligned to by your C-suite, then you can start to do things like prioritize work that makes it easier for developers to include security in what they're doing, right? Provide them the tooling, provide them the education, provide them the time, right? And then just have it built into your DNA. I mean, short of that, you know, good luck, you know, you know. Any other questions?
You know, one of the things, my perspective is from the project management side of things, right? So my thing is from the project management side of it, right? So as the guy who's gonna do the risk assessment, vulnerability to the entire organization, right? It comes down to ethics and morals, right? I mean, there's a job we need to get done, and you have to finish that line. You have to bring the ball across the finish line, but how do you go about doing it, right? You can't keep throwing that can down the line and say, hey, it's not my problem, and somebody else will deal with it, and you get hacked, and deal with it. But it comes down to overall stakeholders, everybody from the guy from lowest guy on the totem pole all the way to the top. And at the end of the day, it's about ethics and morals. That's what I think.
You know, basically make it easy for your organization. Make it part of the mantra that your leadership preaches from the top down, right? And, you know, so that it isn't hard to take the extra time.
Make it easy to do the right thing.
Yeah, make it easy to do the right thing. Do you have a question, Mr. Ted?
I figured it out, I was trying to figure out who founded Engage.
Who founded Engage?
Kelly Dolan and Michael Frank. Yeah.
Awesome, that was just a bonus question for the.
I didn't know the answer to that one, so glad you asked it.
So,
Anybody else? Any other comments, questions? All right. Before we wrap up, I think we want to pitch a couple local meetups that are happening, Jim. I think we got one tomorrow.
We do, I wasn't expecting to speak. Sure. Okay, so, right here again tomorrow night, 6 to 8 p.m., we have the Code Crafting Community Developer Meetup. It's usually we have some sort of pairing coding exercise, get together, just, you know, work on our craft, be a part of the community, learn some things. So it's a good time, 6 to 8 p.m. It's on Meetup. If you look for it, it's C3 Code Crafting Community.
Thank you, sir. And then our next API Security Meetup, we're going to skip December. We'll let y'all have that month off. And then in January, January 10th will be our next meetup. We are TBD on the location. We are trying to line up more locations to attract more folks to this. So it'll either be at P&G, Kroger, or here again. But we'll decide, we'll get that out in the meetup.
Kroger?
What's that? Yeah, yeah, in one of the stores across the country somewhere.
You have hundreds of options.
We do have a few options when it comes to that. Or we could do 8451.
Well,
Oh.
there's 8451 large language model meetup, that's on November 30th. So if you go on Meetup, you can find it out there pretty easily. That company name was 84.51. So we'll cover large language models, GPT, and Gen AI.
Hey Ted, that's Ted from 8451, if you did not know. So another great meetup. January 10th is our next API Security Meetup. We will literally have Enon Scandy, who was one of the co-developers of the OWASP top 10 exploits. So he was part of the crew that created that to begin with. He works for Traceable, and he will be the speaker in January. So exciting things coming.
One last announcement. And one last local event. It is last minute, but Friday, Saturday, Sunday is Queen City Conference. It is a hacking in the style of DerbyCon. All vendors that are present at that security conference have the right to be removed off stage if they go into a vendor speech. So it's all deep level knowledge, it's all hacking, it's nothing but learning and coding. So come on out, it's queencitycon.org.
Awesome, thank you. Anything else I'm forgetting, Liz? All right. I appreciate everyone coming out. Be safe, drive home, and hopefully we'll see you in January.
Thank you.
Thank you.